sorrow be washed away in the waves of His mercy, as the deep cries out to Thee. We sing, come, Lord Jesus, come, Lord. before. You are the last. Lord, you're the encore. Your name delights for all to see. Who will behold, declare your glory. Glory in the highest. Glory in the highest. Glory in the highest. Apart from you, there is no God. Light of the world, the bright and morning star. Your name will shine for all to see. You are the one. You are my glory. Glory in the highest. Glory in the highest. Glory in the highest. And no one else could ever compare to you, Lord. Let all the earth together declares glory in the highest. Glory in the highest. Glory in the highest. To you, Lord. To you, Lord. Glory in the highest. Glory in the highest. Glory in the highest. To you, Lord. To you, Lord. Glory in the all the earth will sing your praise. The moon, the stars, the sun, and rain. Every nation will proclaim that you are God. You will reign. Glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory to you, Lord. Glory, hallelujah. 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 Glory, glory in the highest. Glory in the highest. Glory in the highest. To you, Lord. To you, Lord. Glory in the highest. Glory in the highest. Glory in the highest. To you, Lord. Glory to you. To you, Lord. glory in the highest, glory in the highest. To you, Lord, to you, Lord, glory in the highest, glory in the highest, glory in the highest. To you, Lord, to you, Lord, to you, Lord. Who is this King of glory? Beautiful and matchless one. Who is this King so holy? Every knee will bow at his throne. Jesus, the Lamb of God, Savior and King. You alone are worthy of our praise forever. You alone are seated on the throne. forever, you alone, seated on the throne of heaven, glorify, glorify you alone. Glorify, glorify you alone. Glorify, glorify you alone. Jesus, Jesus, Lord of lords, King of kings, Son of God.
You alone, Lord. You alone are worthy of our praise. Let's just keep that attitude of worship going for a little longer. Thank you, Lord. You're worthy of praise, Father. You alone. Thank you, Lord, that you're a good, good God. We praise you in every aspect of our lives and we put you first, Father. Thank you, Lord, that we can come to this house and praise you, Lord, and hear the word, Father. Thank you, Lord, for our hearts, Father, and our ears that are going to be inclined to hear your word. Thank you, Jesus, for our brother Milton, Lord, as he brings the word tonight. Thank you, Lord, for a fresh anointing in this room tonight. Holy Spirit, have your way like a fresh wind, Father. Blow, flow like the river. Thank you, Jesus. Wash everything away that's not that's of us, Father. We want more of you, Lord. Let your Spirit flow, Father. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for your faithfulness, Lord. Thank you for your word, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you, Jesus. Cool, thank you. Alrighty. Please welcome our brother Milton. And the kids are going to be going out the back with Pastor Barry. Awesome. Thanks,
Awesome.
Milton.
Cool, thank you. Good evening, family. Okay. That's right, we're doing the many hats again tonight, so. Okay, so last Sunday night, as I was, Pastor B was checking his microphone. I think pastors and leaders like doing that sort of thing. You're listening in the ears and it's like, check 1, 2, can you preach next Sunday night? I was like, yeah, sure. Yeah. All right, so had a busy week planned ahead, so I had to take Friday off to start and prep. And then I was, kind of a day off. The phone still rings even when you have the day off. And then, went down to Auckland yesterday to catch up with a friend and did Rangitoto Island, which was good fun. I highly recommend it if you haven't done it. And then had, it was June and Regan had a birthday function last night. So their combined age was 100, so it was 100th birthday. So that was an excellent time. That was really encouraging too, because it was a lot of your family and that kind of thing, but you could see God moving in June and Regan's family, and it wasn't just a birthday party, it was really a testament to that, and you could see the movement there and what God had done in different family members and that. So situations that had seemed hopeless in the past, God had turned around, and now those people are they're witnessing for Christ, and so that's excellent. Cool. All right, so our opening scripture tonight will be 2 Samuel. Second Samuel chapter 23. And we will start at verse 8. Okay, so the heading is David's Mighty Men. Okay, so verse 8, 2 Samuel chapter 23, verse 8. These are the names of the mighty men whom David had. Josheb-Basshebeth, the Tachmonite, chief among the captains. He had killed 800 men at one time. And after him was Eleazar, the son of Dodo, the Ahohite, one of 3 mighty men with David, whom they defied when they defied the Philistines who were gathered together for battle. And the men of Israel had retreated. So those guys didn't back down. He arose and attacked the Philistines until his hand was weary and his hand stuck to the sword. The Lord brought about a great victory that day, and the people returned after him only to plunder. So here's last man standing, and he still turned back the enemy. Verse 11, and after him was Shammah, the son of Agi the Hararite. The Philistines had gathered together into a troop where there was a piece of ground full of lentils. So the people fled from the Philistines, but he stationed himself in the middle of the field, defended it, and killed the Philistines. So the Lord brought about a great victory. Verse 13. Then 3 of the 30 chief men, cool, thank you. 3 of the 30 chief men went down at the harvest time and came to David at the caves of Adullam. And the troop of the Philistines encamped in the valley of Rephaim. David was then in the stronghold, and the garrison of the Philistines was then in Bethlehem. And David said with longing, "Oh, that someone would give me a drink of the water from the well of Bethlehem, which is by the gate." So the 3 mighty men broke through the camp of the Philistines, drew water from the well of Bethlehem that was by the gate, and took it and brought it to David. Nevertheless, he would not drink it, but poured it out unto the Lord. And he said, "Far be it from me, O Lord, that I should do this. Is this not the blood of the men who went in jeopardy of their lives?" Therefore he would not drink it. These things were done by the 3 mighty men. There's an interesting thing there that I guess David probably realised to be a little bit more careful with his words because of the loyalty of his men. Now Abishai, the brother of Joab, the son of Zeruiah, was chief of another 3. He lifted up his spear against 300 men, killed them, and won a name among these 3. Was he not the most honoured of the 3? Therefore he became their captain. However, he did not attain to the first 3. Verse 20. Benaiah was the son of Jehoiada, the son of a valiant man from Gabseel, who had done many deeds. He had killed 2 lion-like heroes of Moab. He also had gone down and killed a lion in the midst of a pit on a snowy day. And he killed an Egyptian, a spectacular man. The Egyptian had a spear in his hand, so he went down to him with a staff, wrested the spear out of the Egyptian's hand, and killed him with his own spear. These things Benaiah the son of Jehoiada did, and won a name among the 3 mighty men. He was honoured more than the 30, but he did not attain to the first 3. And David appointed him over his guard. Asahel, the brother of Joab, was one of the 30. It's interesting, so there's 2 brothers of Joab there. Was one of the 30. Elhanan, the son of Dodo, Bethlehemite, goes right down. There's another list of guys there. And then right at the end, just for interest's sake, there's and Uriah the Hittite, 37 in all. Does anyone know who Uriah the Hittite was? Yeah, husband, I think. Yeah. So, so Bathsheba's husband, if you know the story there, was actually one of David's mighty men. Cool, so that's a bit of an interesting one, probably a bit of a silly one to tackle when you can't pronounce the words very well, but talking about the mighty ones tonight. The mighty ones. So David and his mighty men, just some characteristics. I mean, obviously this is wartime, so you're measuring greatness by, how many guys they were worth and all that kind of thing, and their exploits in battle. But yeah, they were absolutely fearless and they were bold. They overcame great odds. Had amazing accomplishments, and as we saw there, they're absolutely loyal to David, to their king. The Hebrew, the words for mighty man there are Gabor, which is powerful, warrior. Tyrant could be a use there. Champion, chief, to excel. Giant, man, mighty, strong, valiant. Or valiant man. Another word that comes from, is derived from, is Geber, which I think Dr. Cole used Geber in some of his teachings. Was a valiant man or warrior. And the root word of those ones is Gabar, which is to be strong, to prevail, to be great, or be mighty. It's quite a common word throughout the Old Testament there. So I think that the phrase, I haven't got this exact, but it was Hag Gaborim, which is the mighty ones. Or they had Hag Gaborim David, I think, which is David's mighty ones. But yeah, there's something in those, hopefully it's not just a guy thing, but there's something in those kinds of things when you're reading them out, the accomplishments there, or what they did or what they went through that calls to you on the inside. It just calls you up a level. Obviously, it may not be in the war sense, but just for us to come up a level. And of course, we know now we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but it's in the spiritual realm is where our war is. So there's that greatness calls to us. So we can use examples today. There'd be people that we'd all relate to as great or mighty. But very much be aware that it's not the same as famous. There's plenty of famous people today, and unfortunately their moral shortcomings are all over the news regularly. You get a few that manage to stay true with all the fame and everything that goes with it. But yeah, and then of course the society's pressure these days to to be a voice for what society currently thinks is morality. So that's really skewed there. You can't really look to the famous people very often for the mighty ones, or the ones where you'd call truly great, great in character or great in spirit. We've got examples here. We could look back up the line through Raymer, obviously. We had all highly esteemed Pastor Colin founding this house, and strong man of character, and known for his integrity. Of course, you got the Caminettis, and then obviously Kenneth Hagin and that, who founded Raymer. But even outside our own, own church and the different churches of different things, or there's people who are great Christians who have excelled in their fields. So are worth noting and worth following their examples. But it's very true that nobody is born great. Back to the famous thing, you could be born famous just because of who your parents are. But you're not born great. That's something you become, or you grow into, or you build. So even David's mighty men, they weren't always mighty. So you'd have to ask the question, well, how did they become mighty, or where'd they come from? And really they became mighty by association with David. Down at ICFM, a couple of months back there, Pastor Don talked about having about 5 people around you who could speak into your life, who you'd listen to. Who you'd bounce, when you got vision in that, you'd bounce it off them and just say, hey, so you make sure it's not just head stuff. So that was really good. So you become mighty, really, or you're shaped by association and training and practice. You could put other things there too, but association is really what we're going to focus on tonight. Right, so let's go back into some of the backstory. We'll journey with these mighty men a little bit tonight. So we'll back up to 1 Samuel. We're in 2 Samuel at the moment, so we'll back up to 1 Samuel 22. And verse 1 again. All right, who's got it? Got it? Okay, chapter 22, verse 1. David therefore departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. So when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, they went down there to him. And everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, everyone who was discontented gathered to him. So he became captain over them, and there were about 400 men with him. So distressed, debt, discontented. Does that sound like the list of people we read before? You reckon that's the same people? We're going to skip ahead a little bit. We'll just follow the story through. So chapter 23. Cool, we've got a very, very simple message tonight. So, right, chapter 23. And we will go verse 1 through 5. Then they told David, saying, look, the Philistines are fighting against Keilah, and they are robbing the threshing floors. Therefore David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I go and attack these Philistines? And the Lord said to David, go and attack the Philistines and save Keilah. But David's men said to him, look, we are afraid here in Judah. How much more than if we go to Keilah against the armies of the Philistines? Again, does that sound like the men who would, one man would stand against 800, or, the men who stationed themselves in a field and defended it, or the men who went and took out lions and giants? Then David inquired of the Lord once again, and the Lord answered him and said, arise, go down to Keilah, for I will deliver the Philistines into your hands. And David and his men went to Keilah and fought with the Philistines, struck them with a mighty blow, and took away their livestock. So David saved the inhabitants of Keilah. So they'd come down there, they're scared, they're discontented, they're basically on the run. You're looking at an outlaw band here, basically, because Saul was trying to kill David, and these people were also discontented and in trouble, so they went to David too. And so they're going to go save the city, and God had already told David, go, I'll deliver them by your hand. But they made him go back and ask God again, like, are you sure? So you certainly wouldn't be calling them mighty men at this stage. But they start to see that God is with David because they overcome. So they wouldn't do it now, but that faith is starting to build. Something's starting to rise in them. They're starting to come up a level. See, they were timid, but they learned to trust God and that God was with David. So let's continue the story on. So we go over to chapter 24. So they learned to trust God, to be bold, to stand in faith with David. But then they're picking up from David, as they're walking with David, they're picking up from his spirit and from his character as they go along. So chapter 24, verse 1. And it happened when Saul had returned from following the Philistines that it was told him, saying, take note, David is in the wilderness of En-Gedi. Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men from all Israel, which was a good crowd. You're thinking 3,000 against 400. And went to seek David and his men on the rocks of the wild goats. So he came to the sheepfolds by the road where there was a cave, and Saul went in to attend to his needs. And David and his men were staying in the recesses of the cave. Then the men of David said to him, this is the day which the Lord said, behold, I will deliver your enemy into your hand, that you may do to him as it seems good to you. And David arose and secretly cut off a corner of Saul's robe. Now it happened afterward that David's heart troubled him because he cut Saul's robe. And he said to his men, the Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch out my hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of the Lord. So you've got to remember, Saul's he's disobeyed God. He's by this stage he's not really mentally stable anymore. But he was anointed of God in the first place, so David wouldn't touch him. David had already been anointed king. He knew he was going to be king one day, but he wasn't going to move it into position himself. He wasn't going to push the old king out of the way. He was waiting on God to do it, waiting on the Lord's timing. The Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch out my hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of the Lord. So David restrained his servants with these words and did not allow them to rise against Saul. And Saul got up from the cave and went on his way. David also arose afterward, went out of the cave, and called out to Saul, saying, my lord the king. And when Saul looked behind him, and David stooped with his face to the earth and bowed down, so he's still honouring him. And David said to Saul, why do you listen to the words of the men who say, indeed, David seeks your harm? Look, this day your eyes have seen that the Lord delivered you today into my hand in the cave, and someone urged me to kill you. But my eye spared you, and I said, I will not stretch out my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. Moreover, my father, see, yes, the corner of your robe in my hand. For in that I cut off the corner of your robe and did not kill you. Know and see, there is neither evil nor rebellion in my hand. And I have not sinned against you, yet you hunt my life to take it. Let the Lord judge between you and me, and let the Lord avenge me on you, but my hand shall not prevail against you. As the proverb of the ancient says, but my hand shall not be against you. After whom has the king of Israel come out? Whom do you pursue? A dead dog? A flea? Therefore let the Lord be judge between you and me, and plead my case, and deliver me out of your hand. So that's amazing there. But see, his Saul realised he was wrong for a little while. He came against David again later. But his men are watching this. His men are seeing this. They're learning how to behave. They're learning that their character is getting built up the whole time. They're learning to become mighty men. They're learning even though you could do something doesn't mean you should. You could take things into your own hands. God said you're going to be king anyway. And like his men thought, well, it must be time. Here's the man in your hands. You could be king today. But David was of a different spirit there. He wouldn't do it. He trusted God to fulfill his word. Now, of course, there's times where we've given prophecy, and that the Bible does say, Paul said to Timothy, to wage the good warfare by the prophecies given to you. I believe it was along those lines. But yeah, you're not talking about taking others out. There's a time to step forward in faith, but it's not about, not at the expense of someone else. So you can see there, so at that time there, the 400 learned restraint in God's timing. If you know the story of David a bit more, and that, Joab, I mentioned him before, he had two brothers that were in the list of mighty men, but Joab wasn't. Joab was David's general most of the time, and if anyone else has ever given the general's job would kill them and get his job back. So he was more of a career person, but he wasn't considered a mighty man. Even though he's a man of war like these other men, he might have been able to take out multiple people like these other men. He didn't have the character. He wasn't truly great, or he wasn't truly a mighty man. And even Joab's armor bearer was in the list. So all the people around Joab, but he never came up to that level. So we're continuing on here, 1 Samuel chapter 26. Just running through the journey with these people who are becoming mighty men. Okay, we'll skim through here. Okay, verse 1. Now the Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah, saying, "Is David not hiding in the hill of Hakilah, opposite Jeshimon?" Then Saul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph, having 3,000 chosen men of Israel with him. He's got his 3,000 again, with him to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul encamped in the hill of Hakilah, which is opposite Jeshimon, by the road. But David stayed in the wilderness, and he saw that Saul came after him into the wilderness. David therefore sent out spies and understood that Saul had indeed come. So David arose and came to the place where Saul had encamped. And David saw the place where Saul lay, and Abner the son of Ner, the commander of his army. Now Saul lay within the camp, with the people encamped all around him, so he's protected by his men. Then David answered and said to Ahimelech the Hittite, and to Abishai the son of Zeruiah, brother of Joab, saying, "Who will go down with me to Saul in the wilderness?" And Abishai said, "I will go down with you." So David and Abishai came to the people by night, and there Saul lay sleeping within the camp, with his spear stuck in the ground by his head. And Abner and the people lay all around him. Then Abishai said to David, "God has delivered your enemy into your hand this day." So he still hasn't learnt the lesson yet. "Now therefore please let me strike him at once with the spear, right to the earth, and I'll not have to strike him a second time." But David said to Abishai, "Do not destroy him, for who can stretch out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless?" David said, "Furthermore, as the Lord lives, the Lord shall strike him, or his day shall come to die, or he shall go out to battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed." And then he took the spear and a jug of water, and he called out to Saul and woke him up. But you can see again there David's heart, same thing. He wasn't going to try and move the time clock along himself. He was waiting on God. So if God wanted to make him king, God would do it. Right, so we'll take a bit of a skip a chapter there, a few chapters. But basically, not long after that, David got into fear, it seems, and came up with his own plan a bit. So he went over and helped to hide in the Philistines' territory with the Philistines. Made out he was defecting, and one of the Philistine kings there gave him Ziklag, and he sort of made out he was going and raiding the Philistines' territory, but he wasn't. So in a sense, he's an outlaw. He sort of become a raiding party, but he was raiding other areas and leaving no survivors. But it was out of fear, because he sort of said that, well, Saul will catch up with me. Because even though he'd spared Saul twice and Saul had sort of gone home, then he'd always come back after him. All right, so let's go over to chapter 30 now. read from verse 1 again. Now it happened when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day that the Amalekites had invaded the south and Ziklag, attacked Ziklag and burned it with fire. So that was their base of operations at the time, or their home city. And had taken captive the woman and those who were there from small to great. They did not kill anyone, but carried them away and went their way. So David and his men came to the city, and there it was burned with fire, and their wives, their sons, their daughters had been taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him lifted up their voices and wept until they had no more power to weep. And David's two wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess and Abigail the widow of Nabal the Carmelite, had been taken captive. Now David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because the soul of the people was grieved, every man for his sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord. Then David said to Abiathar Ahimelech's son, "Please bring the ephod here to me." And Abiathar brought the ephod to David. So David inquired of the Lord, saying, "Shall I pursue this troop? Shall I overtake them?" And he answered them, "Pursue, for you shall surely overtake them, and without fail recover all." So you can see in that moment there, David's really turned back to God. And we use that example, he strengthened himself in the Lord when he gets to the lowest of lows. And that's true because times come to all of us that can be hard, as Pastor B's been speaking on. But arguably this hard time was his own fault because he'd gone off out of the will of God. God never told him to go to the Philistines. At least the Bible doesn't say so. It said that David said in his heart that Saul will catch up with him. But yeah, he's turned back to God, he's strengthened himself in the Lord, and he's sought the Lord's counsel to go and recover what he lost, and they did. But yeah, you could see he nearly lost it all there, and even his own life. Just going and doing things in his own strength. But yeah, he strengthened himself, he turned back to God, strengthened himself in the Lord, got back on track and won back what was lost, and taught his men to be. And there was also the example later on where some men were too tired to finish the journey and fight the fight, so they stayed with the spoils. And when they came back, the soldiers who had gone out to the fight didn't want to share the spoils of war, or even, I think, return the possessions of the others. But David taught them to be fair there and to share everything equally, because the others, even though they were too tired to catch up and fight, they protected the gear, and they stayed back and protected camp. So this whole time their character is being built, their faith is being built, they're becoming mighty. But this is a far cry from when they first came and they were the discontented and the people in debt and the down and outers. But only by being with David did they become mighty. So one more example here. Let's skip over to 2 Samuel, chapter 1, a couple of pages. Second Samuel chapter 1, starting at verse 1. Now it came to pass after the death of Saul, when David had returned from the slaughter of the Amalekites, and David had stayed 2 days in Ziklag, so they'd just come back to Ziklag. On the third day, behold, it happened that a man came from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dust on his head. So it was when he came to David that he fell to the ground and prostrated himself. And David said to him, "Where have you come from?" So he said, "I have escaped from the camp of Israel." Then David said to him, "How did the matter go? Please tell me." And he answered, "The people have fled from the battle. Many of the people are fallen and dead. Saul and Jonathan, his son, are dead also." So David said to the young man who had told him, "How do you know that Saul and Jonathan, his son, are dead?" Verse 6, Then the young man who told him said, "As I happened by chance to be on Mount Gilboa, there was Saul leaning on his spear, and indeed the chariots and horsemen followed hard after him. Now when he had looked behind him, he saw me and called to me, and I answered, 'Here I am.' Then he said to me, 'Who are you?' So I answered and said, 'I am an Amalekite.' He said to me again, 'Please stand over me and kill me, for anguish has come upon me, but my life still remains in me.' So I stood over him and killed him, because I was sure that he could not live after he had fallen. And I took the crown that was on his head and the bracelet that was on his arm, and have brought them here to my lord." Therefore David took hold of his own clothes and tore them. So did all the men who were with him. And they mourned and wept and fasted until evening for Saul and for Jonathan, his son. Interesting there that David wept, but his men did also. Therefore David took hold of his own clothes and tore them, and so did all the men who were with him. See, they were becoming more like him. They'd learned to honour Saul, even though Saul was after them. And they mourned and wept and fasted until evening for Saul and for Jonathan his son, for the people of the Lord, and for the house of and for the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. Then David said to the young man who told him, "Where are you from?" And he answered and said, "I am the son of an alien, an Amalekite." So David said to him, "How was it you were not afraid to put forth your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed?" Then David called one of the young men and said, "Go near and execute him." And he struck him so that he died. So David said to him, "Your blood is on your own head, for your own mouth has testified against you, saying, 'I have killed the Lord's anointed.'" Wow, so even there, he wouldn't raise his hand against him, but he even executed the person who claimed. It was interesting because the guy didn't actually do it, he just thought he was going to get rewarded. But he even executed the guy who claimed to have killed Saul. That was the honour he had for Saul and for the Lord's anointing on someone's life. But see, these men are journeying with him. These men are with him the whole time. These men who are becoming the mighty men. Yeah, so David honoured Saul, the Lord's anointed, to the end. So you can see these people that were journeying with David. These men's lives were marked, or probably more accurately, they're completely reconstructed from the ground up during their time with David. So there was the 400. The mighty men weren't necessarily all 400, because I think his family and stuff were included in the 400, and there'd be other families and children and things as well, I'd imagine. But yeah, by the end of so at that point, then David becomes king. There's the process of time. Not the whole nation didn't accept him at once, but there was other people from different tribes started joining themselves. I think we're not going to go to it, but it talks about the sons of Issachar, the sons of Gad, all those different ones. The ones who knew the signs of the times. I think the sons of Gad, I think it's their countenance was like lions. It says those ones. So they're not part of David's mighty men, but you see they're mighty people. And they joined themselves to him, so there was like a momentum that was built. And by the end of David's reign, of course he was king, when he was king over Israel, he had about 1.3 million soldiers in his army. So you can see it built, but he had a core group there, David's mighty men, that were different. These people had been with him. You see, that the time you spend with someone, doing life with them, so the more time you spend with someone doing life with them, the more you become like them. And just thinking that they'd been with him, it was said of the disciples that people could see they'd been with Jesus. That's Acts 4:13 if you want the reference. Also, just remembering, I think it was Peter when Jesus was on trial. Peter was trying to sneak in there too. But it's when Peter denied Jesus. And some of the people said, "Weren't you also with them?" He said, "Your speech betrays you." So Peter was talking like Jesus because he'd been hanging around, talking like that group because he'd been around them. And then it said he started to swear and curse and stuff, so it didn't sound like them anymore because he was trying to save his own skin at that point. But see, the more you hang around people, the more you become like them. We'd all know obviously school kids, you get your different cliques and groups and stuff, and they all start to dress the same and talk the same. Children is another one. I was at a friend's place a bunch of months back, and they were looking after a young child that wasn't theirs, but they're just babysitting. And it was, you could, some of the things, the boy's only 2. You're saying some things a 2-year-old shouldn't say. It would have been funny if it wasn't sad, but it was some of that stuff, because you can see what they've been around, whether it's the parents or whether it's sometimes they pick up something from strangers sometimes on the way past. But yeah, generally speaking, you can tell what people are around by what comes out of their mouth, the way they live, the way they carry themselves. the way they dress, all those sorts of things. So we become like who we hang around. We become like who we're with, who we do life with. So really, in some sense it's about the mighty men, but the story is really about David. Who was he? Because these men were becoming like him. See, ultimately David's strength and might was in his relationship with God. He was fiercely patriotic, as you know from the story of David and Goliath. And he absolutely believed that the Israelites were God's own people. So God was backing them. So 1 Samuel 16 and 17, those are really where you'd pick up the backstory of David. Because we'll skim a couple of them. We won't read the whole Old Testament. That's right, we're sticking sort of in a localised area a bit more today, but so we'll go to 1 Samuel 16. But yeah, amazing, these men went from timid, they wouldn't, as a group, they were scared to go down and fight the Philistines to help a city. And then later on, David's having a down day, obviously, and he talks, I want some water from the well of Bethlehem, and three of them are right, and they go up and attack the Philistines by themselves. They don't even, ask God about it. They just David said, so we go. And David didn't even ask them to, he just made a comment. Completely different men. Right. I'm just scanning a little bit here. Okay, so chapter 16, Samuel anoints David king. Let's read a little portion in. Let's go to verse 14, so after the anointing. This is back to Saul. So it's when Saul's really starting to lose it in a lot of ways because he's already been disobeying God. But the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and a distressing spirit from the Lord troubled him. And Saul's servants said to him, surely a distressing spirit from the Lord is troubling you. Let our master now command your servants who are before you to seek out a man who is a skillful player on the harp. And it shall be that he will play with his hand, and when the distressing spirit from God is upon you, you shall be well. So Saul said to his servants, provide me now a man who can play well, and bring him to me. Verse 18. Then one of the servants answered and said, Lord, look, I have seen a son of Jesse, the Bethlehemite, who is skillful in playing, a mighty man of valour, a man of war, prudent in speech, and a handsome person, and the Lord is with him. So you can see there that he was obviously known for playing the harp. We know from all the Psalms he wrote that he was a worshipper. He just loved God's presence, spending time with God and worshipping. And he was obviously already known as a mighty man. He says, a mighty man, a man of valour, a man of war, prudent in speech, and a handsome person, and the Lord is with him. So they didn't know he'd been anointed king. But there was obviously something on his life. And obviously when he's anointed, they would also carry something with it. Let's skip over. Okay, so Goliath came and challenged Israel. Everyone hides in their tents, basically. Whenever Goliath came out to challenge them, everyone just ran for the hills or ducked for cover, or however you want to say it. And Saul was no better. But yeah, that really riled David up. He's like, we're God's people. Who's this man to stand against us? Right. Okay, we won't find that. So David said he would go basically anyway. After he'd sort of been canvassing around, what does the man get who kills Goliath? And no one else was stepping up to the plate. But word gets around that he was asking. So he gets brought before Saul. Then David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him, of Goliath. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "You are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are a youth, and he a man of war from his youth." I think David was about 17 or something here from memory. But David said to Saul, "Your servant used to keep his father's sheep, and when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God." Moreover, David said, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." So you can see his boldness, his courage, his faith there, and you can start to see where his men were getting it from. So it was as these men walked with him, they start to, that rubs off, they start to become more like him. See, David was entrusted with his father's sheep before God entrusted him with the 400 and then the nation. You see, there's a principle there that you learn that you be faithful with what God's put in your hand now. He's always got more for you, but you be faithful with what he's entrusted you to now, because that's the, when you're faithful in the little things, he can trust you with more. Psalms 23, I think, is a really one that we're all familiar with. And I thought that was a good snapshot of David too. You see, David was a shepherd as he's growing up. And really he was a shepherd all his life. But see, David says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Or, I have no lack. "He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me, your rod and your staff comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." And you can see that there how he was the provider for those sheep, but he realised that, like a sheep, God was his shepherd. That God was his provider. So who was David? He was a worshipper. He was a shepherd. He was a protector. He was also a warrior, and he was also a king. And that's who his men were living with and walking with and learning to become like all that time, starting in the cave of Adullam. See, to become mighty, you have to walk with the mighty. And ultimately, to be truly mighty, you have to walk with the Almighty. So really, who was the mightiest in David's group? It was David. Out of all those men, we can read the whole list of mighty men, but really it was David's mighty men. You could look at he was reproducing himself in them. And of course, as we said, he could only do it because he was walking with the Almighty. Yes, there's a few examples of this in the Bible. It's brought occasionally. Abraham, he had his 318 trained servants. When we won't go there, but it's just another example. When Lot, Abraham's nephew, was captured, Abraham went with his 318 servants and got them back and rescued them. Of course, we've got David's mighty men here. And the New Testament example would be Jesus with the 12 disciples. So these 12 disciples, they were, we had a tax collector, you had fishermen, and you had other different walks of life there, but they became the apostles. They became the witnesses for Christ. So as we bring this around, I guess the question for us is really, who have you been with? Or who have I been with? Dr. Cole said life is lived on levels and arrived at in stages. So we don't always get to pick what stage we're in, but we can always choose what level we live on. And you see these 400, David's mighty men, they came to him in the pits really. They were down and out. They were at the lowest level. But they got around the right person. And they started to rise as they walked life out with him. Firstly, it's hugely important who I'm with and becoming like God first, obviously. So for me, that's been from a young age. I've said it before, but it's just one of those things. I learned to get into the Bible daily from a young age. When I was first starting to read, I think I've said it before too, I couldn't really read till I was about 8 years old. I struggled to pick it up for some reason. But when I was given my first Bible, my parents gave me one, and I started off reading, you got the 4 columns. I read 1 column, and it didn't matter if it was the middle of a sentence, I'd probably stop there. but I was starting to read, and just daily, and my reading actually took off. It was quite a miracle there. Also the prayer time, just being in God's presence every day. I mean, we all go through seasons. Sometimes you're busier than others, all those sorts of things. But just building that as a regular habit. It's like, and of course, all the things Pastor B's been talking about lately, with when you're going through tough times too. All of those are just daily things. Being in the house, being connected, knowing who God is, all those things. So hugely important who I'm with and who I'm becoming like. Daniel 11:32, it said that the people who know their God shall be strong and carry out great exploits. That was that was in a prophecy. It was talking about a context of there also corruption and deception happening. But if you know your God, you'll be strong and carry out great exploits. So that's for us. Who have we been with? The next question would be, it goes beyond us. Who has been with you? Pastor Barry is very strong on the discipleship side of things. We all influence others whether we know it or not. But like David, you'd see he had his 400, but then once he was actually made king, that started to expand. Others started to join him as the kingdom started to come over to him. And then, as I said, he ended up with about 1.3 million soldiers in his army. So obviously that represented, as a population, there was a huge, he had all of Israel. So there's an expanding circle as you go out. Obviously your direct connection to them won't be as strong, like the rest of Israel weren't the mighty men. But it still brings people, and it's still reproducing one to the next. Let's go over to Matthew 28, verse 16. Matthew chapter 28 and verse 16. You all there? Right, then the 11 disciples, of course we're minus Judas, who betrayed Jesus. Then the 11 disciples went away into Galilee to the mountain, which Jesus had appointed for them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and spoke to them, saying, "All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." See, these people had been with Jesus, and now he had discipled them. Now he was telling them to go and disciple others. They were to go preach the gospel, as one of the other versions says, but also to disciple people. So they were his witnesses. And it's to build from there. And it's come right down to us. right through the generations from that Great Commission. And that Great Commission stands for us as well. To round this up, we're not born mighty ones, or we're not born Gabor, as the word was. So David's Gaborim, the mighty ones, they were, in a lot of ways, they were forged in the fires of David's and the nation's trials. See, David was in a low place too. He was anointed king, but he was on the run. And that's when these men came to him. So you'd think it's, in a lot of ways, it'd be the worst of times for him to have to look after others as well. He's on the run. Things are not going his way. God's spoken, but it looks like the opposite's happening. And these men came and walked with him through these trials, and him and the mighty men rose up out of that. So that really speaks to what, again, Pastor Barry's been talking about, living victoriously in tough times. Is that don't discount those times. It's those times actually where you can grow the most. But sometimes it's in the times that you're under intense pressure that you become stronger. The times don't feel good, but God's forging you during those times and building you up. You're learning to come up and live on a higher level. Because David had been anointed king, but really he was an outlaw on the run at that time. Or so it looked like. Cool, so those two questions again tonight. So who are you with and who is with you? So we're gonna close it there. Just something to ponder on. If we're able to have the worship team back for a little bit. So we'll just put the call out. If you want to make a hard adjustment with God, there's many times I get caught up to the front, and you think I've laid it all down for God. Pastor Barry was even